I generally say that solutions architect is an amalgamation of a technical person as well as a good consultant. I interview a lot of solutions architect, and I, along with their technical skills, I do see that like, are the guys like a good consultant? Will they be able to like it's an external facing role. Solutions architect is a external facing role, so they need to meet clients, like whether they are partners, customers, external stakeholders, day in and day out. So that's what I try and during the interview I try and gauge that whether or not they are good consultants. And to do that, you need to be understanding what are the qualities of a good consultant, right? And like one of the first quality is about demonstrating your depth of experience, and experience in not just about like technically solving a problem, but also like getting out of scenarios or solving scenarios uh, that were hard. When, as a consultant, when I start speaking to a consultant, it should be evident from what the person is speaking, that when the person is sharing experience, I should be able to like understand their credibility and capability, instead of like they sharing it explicitly that this is what I have done, or like praising themselves or sharing their resume. In the conversation itself, the consultant should you gauge that the consultant has the experience or the not. And then obviously, as a consultant, you always start from customer. It's like a customer problem. You should be having client first mindset, instead of just thinking about this is what my past has been, this is how I have solved problem, this is how I'm going to solve this problem. you know work backwards from customers. Like, this is what the customer problem is, and this is the right solutions for the uh, problem. And it might not be like yeah, we as a good consultant, we do not shy away from like getting out of our comfort zone and trying something new. As a good consultants, we do ask a lot of questions, relevant, powerful, open-ended questions that can help us reveal new insights, right? Now, a lot of times, even customers do not know a lot of things. They do have a high level understanding, but you need to ensure that you're asking the right questions that will help customers think exactly of what their requirements are, so that you are able to like uh, make them understand that are they thinking in the right direction, or they need to pivot. That's what a good consultant does. Like, instead of starting with a solution, they try and understand if the customer is in the right direction, or if there is a pivot required before presenting a solution. And for being a good consultant, one of the most important skill is the people skills. Along with the technical skills, people skills is really important, and that it's even happens in an interview, right? On the other side of the table, they are just people, right? So don't be nervous, don't be scared. They're just another people who are trying to hire. Like, right now we are in such a age of like short of technical folks, so everyone wants to hire. When like I'm taking an interview, I'm trying to see and provide hints to the candidate to lead them in the right direction, because like uh, we don't want to like interview more and more. We would like to get the right candidate and get them onto the job as soon as possible. So like, have those people skills so that you are able to strike that natural conversations in the interview, as well as when you're in a customer meeting, strike that natural conversations, right? And as it has been mentioned multiple times, and most people do understand, but good consultants are excellent listeners, are really excellent listeners. They are very active in listener. And listening is just not about like, okay, let the customer keep speaking, and I'm not going to like talk or interrupt while customer is speaking. Listener means that we are able to understand what the customer is saying, right? And then we are able to like, whatever follow-up questions that you're going to ask, that needs to be based on what customer has spoken about. It's not that you have a list of 10 questions that you have prepared in your mind, and you have let customer speak for first 15 minutes, but then you ask those 10 questions only that you have prepared before the meeting. It's about adapting to the situation. Listening means that it's an active listening that you need to do. And yes, we are trusted advisors, right? So probably I'll be sharing few articles which will help you understand in depth about what are the good qualities of a consultant. uh, but let's say if you have a question, and there was a discussion about, like C level executives, right? And we'll talk about that also. Let's say in an interview as a solutions architect, right? In an interview, if you are being asked, how would you describe cloud computing? It's a very simple question, and that might be asked at any role. How would you describe cloud computing? Now, your answer will actually reflect with whom you are speaking, right? Now, obviously, you are going to, like describe cloud computing, and like do not make it convoluted. Just use the standard definition. It's a very simple definition of cloud computing. It is an on-demand delivery of IT resources over the internet with pay-as-you-go pricing model. That's a quite simple definition. And then do expand. When you have been asked about a question, just don't say one line and stop, right? You need to, like expand on it. Like instead of buying, owning, or maintaining physical data centers and servers, you can access the technology services like computing power, storage, databases on an as need basis from a cloud provider. That's, like kind of giving them a bit more context. Now this is where your consulting skills will start. This is like a standard definition that you have given, you have provided. But after that, this is where, like Ashish uses great analogies to help, other people understand. And this is where, like you need to understand that who on the other side of the table might be, right? Now, giving an example of electricity might really be helpful. Now think about, just, like, and make it very natural as a conversation. Think about that we are in this room and we are getting the electricity, or you go into a home and you switch on the light and you start getting electricity and you start consuming it. You do not, care about where this electricity is being generated or how it is being transferred to your home. Whenever you need it, you switch on the light and you start consuming it, and when you do not need it, you switch off the light and you stop consuming it, and you pay only for the amount of units that you have consumed. Now think about cloud computing as a parallel thing for your technology resources that you are able to consume over the internet whenever you need them, and you can stop using them when you don't need them, and you pay only for the consumption. So giving an example like this, analogies like this will help your interviewer understand that, okay, the person is able to communicate even to people who might not be that technical, who might not be able to understand, like. Now let's talk about C-level executive. Here we should also be talking about, like uh, advantages of cloud computing. Right now, there are multiple advantages of cloud computing, and it depends upon how much time you have. You can, go really dive deep into cloud computing. Like, for example, the cost benefits that you have. You can trade your fixed expenses for variable expenses. That means your capex that you need to invest in building, owning the data centers, or getting the servers, that can be replaced by variable expenses. You can talk about agility, you can talk about scalability, and so on and so forth. But while you are doing this, that is something that almost everyone who will be appearing for an interview will be telling about all the 5 or 6 benefits of clouds, right? How you can differentiate yourself, how you can make it unique and personalized and showcase your technical skills. In, for example, one of the one of the advantages that you speak about, for example, let's say stop guessing capacity. Share your experience. Remember I said that a good consultant should be demonstrating the depth of experience. So like stop guessing capacity. This is how I do it, right? It's like, uh, even in the customer meetings, when I'm talking to a customer and I'm explaining them cloud for the first time, I try and see how I can relate it to my personal experience. I generally start by saying that, when I started my career with a telecom company. In that, like there was an application that we were rolling out, and we had to guess the capacity. We had to guess the servers that, like we had to provision to, roll out the application. And even with the best guess estimate that we were able to do, there was no guarantee that whether or not, the capacity that we are provisioning will be overutilized or underutilized. Now, it's more like, we always tend to provision it more, because we do not want bad user experience. That comes at a cost, but if you under provision it, then that might mean that the end customers are not having the right experience. So it's always a trade-off, and we generally, enterprises tend to pay more. Now compare that with the cloud computing, knowing that you can scale up and down along with the user demand. You can scale out when the traffic is more, and you can scale in when the traffic is less. That gives you to ensure to track your costs closely to the demand. Now, what you have done with that is that you are able to actually relate one of your personal experience with that, and it can be with anything that you do. For example, another cloud benefit is going to global, global deployments in minutes. You can talk about your experience about how you were involved in an application that was first regional. Let's say it was launched in Europe region or APAC region, and then after a few months the business decided to actually start operations in another region. And through the cloud it was really easy to actually deploy the whole application in another region, so that the latency for the end users is really low. That would have been not that simple. It would have been an on-prem premise, because in the on-prem premise you will need to ensure the whole data center is there, so on and so forth, right? Now that's how you can bring in your personal experience to showcase your consulting skills. Now there is other thing, like one of the follow-up questions that I generally ask is that, let's say there is a CEO of a profitable company, and that CEO is very happy with their on-prem IT infrastructure or estate, right? And they do not have any plans to move to cloud near future. How, and you have a meeting with that CEO, how would you convince, or what advantages you would tell to that CEO who is really happy with their on-prem, to move to cloud? Now, this is where you need to do a lot of research. And even in the interview, obviously, let's say if it pops up into your interview some unexpected questions that you do not have any time to do the research, how would you handle such a scenario? So, for like a CEO, right? What is more important? Business value propositions, time to market, right? The technology that they use is good, but they do not, it doesn't matter for them which technology is being used behind the scenes, as long as their business objectives are met, as long as their customers are happy, as long as any new feature that they need to release, they're able to release it in a timely fashion without impacting the customer experience. That's what you need to focus about. You need to talk about the advantages of cloud in that manner, that how they can focus more on innovation, how they can instead of doing the heavy lifting, or as we call it here at AWS is undifferentiated heavy lifting of maintaining, owning data centers, instead of resources, uh, managing the servers, they can actually be working on the business applications and helping customers get the business value out of those applications, right? Here always talk about you know say that what I'm going to do is that I'm going to give examples to the CEO of the companies in their specific industry verticals. Like say the customer is in a manufacturing industry or in retail industry, or let's say aerospace. We are going to give specific examples of how other companies in similar verticals have started moving to the cloud, what success they have been able to achieve, and how moving to cloud is supporting their growth and helping them with the hyper growth. To give analogies to the CEO that what they are missing out on currently, though they are really happy with their on-prem, but technology is moving really fast, and to get into that bandwagon and be one of the early adopters, it is necessary that they start thinking in that direction. I'll also talk about the security risks, the how the cost consumption can be below, and so on and so forth. So that's how you can for even a straightforward question like how would you describe cloud computing? You can showcase your consulting skills in multiple ways. By adding your own experience, by bringing in different perspectives into the picture. Now let's say, no, let's switch gears. Let's go into a more specific technical question. What is the difference between a UDP and a TCP? Quite common interview question. about what's a UDP and TCP. And what I have seen people generally doing is that obviously telling what the full form of TCP and UDP is, telling about like TCP is a three-way handshake connection protocol, whereas UDP is a connectionless protocol. All that is good. Like technically, the answer is good. I've seldom seen people getting technically UDP or a TCP wrong, right? W- When I see the candidates are raising the bar, is that they start giving examples about what a TCP or a UDP would be, right? On their own without me asking them a follow-up question, right? Like I generally ask, like in case if I'm not able to get any examples, I generally ask this question. Okay, this call that we are having on, generally it is a like a interview over a call. Let's say this call that we are having on, is this a UDP or a TCP that is going on? The video streaming that is happening on, is it a UDP or a TCP? And then in most scenarios candidates do get right. If the candidates get it wrong, obviously then technically they do not have the like one way is telling them that I do not know it, I'll have to check, which is fine. That is like earning trust. You are not actually like trying to guess and you're giving wrong information. But in case if you say that video streaming is over TCP, probably I would like that technically the person, depending upon what role they have applied for and what the requirements is, I might be like technically the candidate might disqualified. But in one of the scenario, one of the candidate did say upfront while explaining what TCP and UDP is, that this call Prasad, and he like, see, you can always talk to interviewer as if you're talking to a friend. That person was so impersonable, so like confident, and made it like affable and made it so engaging. And while like explaining, he said, and by the way, Prasad, the call that we are having is actually going on UDP at this moment. If the bandwidth is low, then you might see some packets dropping, you might see my video getting distorted. And that's what UDP is. That the order of the packets don't matter, you do not get an acknowledgement of everything, so the the stream might be wavy compared to any HTTP request that you might be doing that goes on over a TCP, right? And then there's a three-way handshake. So he did that with an example, a specific example that made me visualize. So consultants are really good at making other people visualize what they are thinking, right? So even if it's a very technical question, then instead of just defining them and telling them what it technically means, you can always showcase your, like consulting says, I was really confident, like in putting that person into the next round, because I knew that if that person will be hired, that person will be able to strike those conversations with customers and will be able to speak the language that the customers will be able to understand, right? uh, let's see how much time do we have. Yeah, we do have some time, so I can probably give few more examples. So let's say there is another question on what are the key considerations when setting up a DR solution for a customer. Now DR is disaster recovery, right? So one of the common questions is, what is the difference between a high availability or a disaster recovery? Or if you're setting up a disaster recovery for a customer, what are the considerations that you take? Again, quite common question based on the role that you apply, but this is a quite common technical question, and this is something that people should be knowing it as a solutions architect, right? Because we do talk about resiliency, right? So in case like if there is something down, you need to ensure that that particular application, service, or solution becomes up. Now, the technical answers to this is that RTO and RPO, right? You need to ensure, you need to understand what the customer RTO and RPO is. And guys, if you are not aware of what RTO and RPO is, please do read about them. Like those are technical terms that you should be aware of. What is a recovery time objective and recovery point objective, and what is a hot standby versus a warm standby versus a cold standby is, right? But now think about, like while answering this question, right, what you can do to make them visualize it, right? How you can give them scenarios, that in which scenario customers should be thinking about a low RTO and a low RPO, and how is that going to impact their cost, versus when it is not a business critical application or a mission critical application, or a customer can withstand our downtime, then how you can actually save them cost by having a high RTO and a high RPO. So look, high RTO and a high RPO means that if the application is down for, let's say, 3 hours, it is still fine. The customer would not be losing business, right? But in some scenarios, like for example, think about amazon.com. Like let's say if amazon.com is down for 3 hours, how much business Amazon would be losing, right? Or for that matter, Netflix. Let's say if Netflix is down for 3 hours, right? Can you imagine the customer experience that would be for Netflix users if the Netflix is down for 3 hours or so? So they need to have really, really low RTO and RPO. So you need to think about those examples and give them examples in which scenario they should be using a low RTO and low RPO, and that would mean that they. So this is where you can like go into hot standby. Hot standby would mean that uh, even if there is a blip, your standby is always ready to take that like a load, and so it will be a seamless experience for your end users versus a cold standby where like there would be some manual intervention that will be required. And even if it's not a manual intervention, it's not that like there will be zero downtime or near zero downtime. So you need to kind of like think about those examples and give them. Like I come from a I started as a telecom background, so like I start talking about like, let's say if we are on a call, right? Then let's say the primary server through which we are having this call gets disconnected, or it shut downs, or some catastrophe happen in that area and that particular uh, server is offline. Then if my call drops, that means it is not a hot standby, right? It will be a warm standby if if the connection doesn't drop at all, and if I'm seamlessly able to continue my conversation with the other person on over the call, that means it's a hot standby because the other server has taken over and it has taken all the session exactly the same way. But if it doesn't happen, it's not a hot standby. Then it can be a warm standby or a cold standby. Now what will be a warm standby? Let the connection was lost, but the call did not disconnected. There was some brief like interruption. I was not able to hear the other person voice and vice versa for, let's say, 10 seconds or 30 seconds, but the call got connected again. The same session got connected again. That's a warm standby. There was another server that was ready, not instantly, but immediately the server was able to take it over, get all the details from the database of, okay, this is a session that was going on between these two people or hundreds of people, right? Hundred of people we having on particular thing, and it was able to reestablish that connection. Warm standby. Cold standby would mean that the connection disconnected, the call drops. Now I'll have to make another call, which is fine, but still there needs to be another server. The next section is taken by the another server. Let's say if there is no another server at all, right? Then that would mean that I will not be able to make that call at all till the time this particular server comes up again. So that's the kind of take your own examples, but try and give like some personalized examples, right? If possible, that will showcase your consulting skills, and that will showcase that you can simplify it for the users to make it them visualize what's happening. Because you, being a technical person, you might be knowing very well what a hot standby versus a warm standby versus a cold standby is, or what the RTO and RPO is. And not that, so these are technical jargons, you can call them, but if you're able to explain this technical jargons in a way that you are able to communicate with the C-level executives, that's what differentiates you as a good consultant.